Oh, hey, look at me. I'm working on stuff, clicking and clacking away over here. Let's take a nice friendly break and check the comments. I'm sure it's gonna be, you know, very inspirational.
Bubble gun. Make it tons of bubbles.
A gun shaped into a monkey and then shoots bananas. Nosferatu gun. It's a gun that shoots out the baby ham. Banana gun. Which shoots a frog gun.
Oh god, the tongue is a projectile.
A baby two-headed dragon which shoots fire and ice balls.
Nope. Instead, let's do a game jam.
This video has been brought to you by my Patreon. It's just $5 a month and it really helps support the channel. Also, I throw in all the art and all the coding files from every game jam I've ever done, which includes this train wreck of a game jam you're watching right now. I've also done a really simple lighting tutorial that really covers everything I do. But if you think there's something that I do pretty well in my game that no one else really talks about, definitely let me know because I would really love to help you guys out. Thank you guys again so much for the support and let's get into the video. So here's the story. In between doing all these game dev projects, I do a podcast called Overscoped. It's very fun. It's like a free therapy session and I get to force my friends to listen to all my problems. But during one episode, we had this awful idea that we could go around the room all saying a random word till it spelled out a sentence. Then, oh wow, wouldn't it be so much fun if we made a game based off of that sentence?
Now, if you're thinking, MZ, you sound so down on this, why? The answer is pretty simple. You haven't heard the sentence. But lucky for you, I have it right here. Man gets fired from his job and jumps off a fucking bridge.
You know, it's been a great YouTube channel. We had a great run, but unfortunately, it's time to hang it up. No, I can do this. We can do this. Okay, I can see myself doing like a serious game somewhere down the line, but this can't be it. Instead, I'm thinking, let's try to turn this on its head and make it fun. We decided on not working more than 48 hours, but in total, the project wasn't due for 2 weeks, so naturally, I put it off till the last couple days, which of course was intentional. That way, I'm stimulating working under pressure. And listen, okay, it wasn't for nothing. I was brainstorming ideas. Ultimately, I wanted to make something where you're kind of destroying an office. It seemed like a fun sort of power fantasy to recreate. Plus, it gives us a pretty obvious reason for why the character is getting fired. So for now, I thought that's a good place to start. Man, it has been so long since I've done this, but we draw a guy, we animate a guy, we get him running. Then move on to some environments, draw these like little tiles. Blowing off the dust on the old shadow tile set, and I bring this thing out of retirement. And for game jams, usually you don't have to do too much environment art, so this is kind of all I need. Then I start drawing objects, because I know we need things to break. I start off with these modular walls, cubicles. And at first I thought I'd draw out like 3 or 4 of them, and then spawn them in as rooms. But here's the problem, and this comes up constantly whenever I do my top-down perspective, and that is this lovely, terrible node called the Y sort. Now, this thing is probably doing amazing stuff behind the scenes, and I don't know how engines work, and it's really, I should respect it. But I don't, because you think things are gonna work a certain way, you bring it in, and all of a sudden the Y sort says, no dummy, it does not how it works. Basically, the Y sort node just determines what's in front or behind of other objects. You 3D guys don't realize how good you have it, you get this automatically. You over there, you're importing your art assets, you're importing your animations, you might as well import your game at this point. So I'm just kidding. I'm not jealous at all of how easy it is for you guys to make something out of nothing with zero effort or skill or anything. Fucking kill your But anytime I save out an art asset, I have to be very aware of how it's going to interact with the Y sort. But this right here, this didn't interact at all the way I wanted. So instead, I go back to the drawing board and draw each wall as its own art asset. This ends up being a blessing in disguise because in my original design of the game, you'd be running through mazes of cubicles, finding things to break, and I'd spawn them in like procedurally or I don't know, semi-random. But now with the walls being their own asset and modular, why not just let the player break those too? What a great idea. Like I said, I love the Y sort, always liked the Y sort, this great sort. Top 10 node, you go the Y sort, the tween node, another tween, I don't. Okay, we have walls, big whoop. Who wastes this much time in a development log having walls that you break? I do, this guy does. I've never done it, now I've done it. I mentioned that I wanted to break things as a core gameplay mechanic. So I put together a short list of like office things that we can break. Desks, computers, trash can, window. But instead of animating any of it, I'm thinking, you know, I'll do it in code when the time comes. All right, so I put together this really basic room and I can't lie, this whole environment is giving me liminal space vibes, which I kind of like. Now this is where you're thinking, MZF, you have learned so much over the course of a couple game jams. The previous me would have been like, each object needs its own script and its own code, special set of rules. Get out of here with that, go to hell. We're just gonna make one class, special class called the destructible class. Everything you just inherit from that, we'll make it work. But now in tandem with that, I have to put together a really basic melee that the player can do. I animate this little swipe, and then when you click, it sort of spawns it around the player. It doesn't look great. Most notably, the player just kind of stands there like there's no animation. But we're running out of time. And in typical me fashion, the deadline's rapidly approaching, and I am nowhere near any gameplay loop. It's okay though, because we have interaction. That's exciting. You can now break walls and you can break little desks and stuff, and look at that. We're having the time of my life over here. Okay, I'm about to give you guys some great insider info, and you take this one to the bank, I'm telling you. Anytime you're doing a game jam and you feel like, what's the point of my game? Just add a high score. Look at that. Oh my god, there's a point. Get the little score up. Yeah, so I go ahead and put a point value on everything we're breaking, and in the time, I'm in voice chat with Vera Studios, someone who's also doing this 48-hour challenge. He's playtesting his game, but I'm not allowed to see it. But the whole time, he just keeps saying how much fun it is and how the movement's amazing. It's a psychological warfare. it totally got in my head. So at this point, I was like, we gotta make our character move fast and be exciting. All right, so I have the combo meter, and now when you reach a certain level, like combo 10, combo 25, combo 50, I adjust the player's speed and how fast they can attack. It took a little while to get going, but I think that feels fun. And for once, it's providing a positive incentive to break stuff and gives a reason for the player to progress through the level. And speaking of level, let's talk about the nerdy stuff. How are we getting all these levels to spawn in and be random? Okay, so what I decided on was making these separate scenes and calling them level blocks. They're really simple. They're just tile sets with an area 2D that's listening for the player, and when the player enters, it loads the next block in the scene. I know, it's rocket science. It's truly amazing. But then for the objects, I put every single wall that could possibly be in the block, visually, so that way I can see whether or not they're overlapping. And then after they're all in there and looking good, I delete them all and just replace them with position 2D nodes. And the reason here is two things. One, I want to spawn them in on a random chance. And two, harboring back to the Y sort, they can only exist on that node. And now I'm gonna cheat a little because I don't have to do this for every object. Instead, what I do is give all that responsibility to the wall. So now once it decides to put a wall there, the wall has its own code to say, add in a desk or a computer, trash bag, tax documents, nuclear launch code, whatever we're adding. So now we finally have a room and the game sort of works, but there's one big problem, and that is there's no way to lose. We should have thought of this all out earlier. There were two solutions that came into my mind, but of course I went with the harder one. I could have just added a timer, make it so the player can only break stuff for so long, and then you sort of get a high score. But then, of course, for some reason, I instead opted on adding enemies to the game, which was way more complicated than it needs to be, and I'm not sure if it made the game any better, but I did it. I draw this little shadowy business figure, give them a cool spawn animation, and for their AI, technically they just move towards the player, but to make it a little bit different, they have a timer, so randomly they'll just stop moving. Oh wow, it's artificial intelligence. Wow. Okay, at this point, I'm pretty happy with what I have. I'm pretty high in my horse, thinking I nailed it. I did everything I needed, until I realized I'm forgetting one really crucial thing. And by the time I add it, the whole game really goes off the rails.
Working on small indie games is fun. Well, hold on, maybe fun isn't always the correct term. Definitely lots of ups and downs, especially when it comes to learning everything. But that's where the sponsor of today's video really comes in, Brilliant.org.
Brilliant is a fun and super informative way to learn anything from entry-level coding to large language models. Meanwhile, the whole time, you're actually getting the correct information. If you're learning game dev on your own, I've been there. I mean, I still am there. Learning online is a mishmash of good, but sometimes, frankly, bad advice. And oftentimes, I'm left questioning if anything I've learned is really valuable. But in my experience, that's where Brilliant really shines. A course that I always really liked was programming in Python. I remember when I first got into Godot, everyone says GDScript, a lot like Python, but I didn't know what that meant. But now I see those similarities, and it feels really good to get a more traditional understanding of coding, the whole time being tied to a really fun interactive experience. So if you go to brilliant.org/MZ, where they also offer 20% off the annual plan. I want to thank Brilliant so much for supporting the channel. It really means a lot. And once again, guys, it's brilliant.org/MZ. All right, and with that, we'll get back to the video.
Okay, so the big problem that arose is something that happens a little bit more often than I'd like to admit.
You see a theme for a game jam, your brain collects all these ideas, and you sort of run off in one direction, and then at one point, you take a step back and realize, what was the actual theme? What am I supposed to be making? Oh, of course, it was destroy an office space simulator. That's what I was supposed to make. No, it wasn't that at all. The quote was, a guy gets fired from his job and jumps off a bridge. We don't have a bridge. He's not jumping. There's no bridge in the whole tri-state area. Yeah, this one messed this one up. And in the timeline, we were pretty much ready to gear up to record the podcast, share our game, and I don't have the game. So at the time, I speak with Henry and I go, hey, wouldn't it be great if we just pushed it back one more day? And then behind the scenes, I'm just scotch taping everything together, trying to figure out how we can rewrite the entire gameplay loop to now include a bridge you could possibly jump off. I decided that the level blocks need to end at some point, and I'll add a window that the character sort of jumps out of. Then I drew this separate scene where the character is sort of running on the scaffolding. So good, and now we have a bridge. This wouldn't exist in the real world, but to avoid it getting too morbid, I decided, we could have a helicopter come up and the character jumps off the bridge onto the helicopter. And in a way to make this make any sense, I made it so that ends your run and it saves your score. Because I managed to push everything back by a day or two, I used the extra time to add audio, because otherwise there was gonna be nothing. But I want to make sure that I did almost all the sounds myself. So I quickly put together the song, these really amazing hit sound effects when you hit enemies, and probably the most obnoxious thing I added in my sleep-deprived state, which was these minutes of dialogue that happens when you enter the bridge. It's just me doing a horrible Italian accent, basically making fun of the character or just rambling in general.
Hey, don't be jumping. Jumping would end your run. I didn't have time to write down a script or sort of instructions on how the game works.
And I made like 10 of them that just randomly play every time you get here. I think at this point, I was sort of just giving up and having fun, which is rare, but really nice. I managed to finish the game, albeit with a pushback deadline. But most importantly, I finished it before the podcast where we had to share our games. So if you want to see their reaction to my nonsense game, along with my reaction to all their crazy games, I'll drop a link to that podcast in the description here. And I gotta be honest, it was nice going back to a game jam. As it stands now, my Discord has one set up for late September, and I'm starting to realize realize the importance of having something like a game jam in my life. Far Gone Frontier is such a big project. You can get lost in the weeds for months working on something with almost nothing to show. Then I feel bad, like I'm fading away working on something no one's gonna see. But the game jams let you have fun again, even if I'm making mistakes or designing things that are sort of doomed to fail. I'd rather fail there than on my big project. In a weird way, game jams sort of feel like an allegory for school. As much as I hated writing papers or having work assignments, once you're out and in the real world, you start to realize maybe that stress wasn't all that bad. I mean, hell, I never got as much done in 1 week than when I was in a Godot Wild Jam. So going forward, I want to do more of these. And if that means Far Gone Frontier becomes a much longer set project than I initially wanted, then frankly, I'm okay with that, as long as I don't burn out. All right, guys, well, thank you so much for watching, so much for the support on Patreon. It really does mean a lot to me. It makes me one step closer to maybe one day leaving my job, which would mean a lot more videos, you know, I'm just saying. All right, guys, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.